Your mom had a savior complex, Kevin. It was annoying, honestly. That's what Julianne's father said to me over dinner the first time I met her parents. And Julianne just laughed. I was 35, sitting at a mahogany dining table I clearly didn't belong at, wondering how I ended up being humiliated by a man whose alcohol detox my dead mother once quietly paid for. My name's Kevin. I'm a middle school teacher in Minnesota. And until about 2 months ago, I was engaged to Julianne. Smart, gorgeous, sharp-tongued. The kind of woman who turns heads at corporate dinners and makes strangers feel like they forgot to button their shirts. We met at a charity workshop where she was a guest speaker, and I was volunteering as the guy handing out name tags and sandwiches. She noticed my tattered copy of Beloved sticking out of my tote bag and made a joke about trauma bonding. I smiled, said I liked the way Toni Morrison forces you to confront things. That night, she messaged me first. 6 months later, I was driving across town in a secondhand Civic to have dinner with her family. That's when I met the Whitmores. Her mom, Lorraine, was the kind of woman who never said, "Nice to meet you," without adding something like, "I didn't expect you to be so soft-spoken." Her dad, Douglas, had the fake charm of a man who thinks tipping 10% is generosity, and that my public school salary was quaint. I told myself they just needed time, but they didn't. Here's where it gets worse. My mother, Clarice, wasn't just some random woman they could casually insult. She was the only reason Douglas Whitmore didn't end up jobless or worse after his third DUI nearly destroyed his investment firm 10 years ago. Back then, I was still living at home, working toward my certification, and Mom was doing night shifts as a community nurse. She treated him when no one else would, found him a discreet rehab center, and even drove him to AA when his wife refused to be seen doing it. She never told anyone. She never held it over his head. That was just who she was. She passed away 5 years ago from ovarian cancer, and even while dying, she never let go of her belief that people deserved grace. It wrecked me. She was all I had. My dad died when I was a kid. There were no siblings, no cousins, no backup. Just me and her. Losing her felt like someone turned the lights off in my life and forgot where the switch was. Julianne knew all this. She saw the grief. She held me when I cried. She placed flowers on my mom's headstone with me. She was gentle then. Kind. That version of her didn't last. As soon as the engagement ring slid onto her finger, everything changed. Not immediately, but in this slow, subtle way, like a faucet leaking just enough to rot the wood beneath. Suddenly, I wasn't part of the wedding planning. I was being too sentimental when I asked if we could play one of Mom's favorite hymns at the reception. Julianne said, "It's a wedding, Kevin. Not a memorial." I should have said something. I didn't. Instead, I found myself agreeing to a guest list where only 4 people from my side were invited. 4. In a 120-person wedding. She said, "Your side's just smaller, babe. Don't make this a thing." And still, I stayed. Because I loved her. Because I thought this was just stress. Because I didn't want to believe that the person I fell in love with had quietly decided I wasn't worth including in my own life anymore. But the night I truly saw it was over was a week before the rehearsal dinner. We were at her parents' house, going over centerpieces and table placements. Lorraine was flipping through fabric swatches like she was planning a royal coronation. I asked if we could set one table with gardenias, my mom's favorite flower. It was small. One table. Just a nod. Lorraine didn't even look up. She just said, "Clarice was sweet, but her taste was very provincial. Let's stick with something more elegant." I looked at Julianne, expecting something. A word. A frown. Anything. She just shrugged and said, "Mom's not wrong." And that was the moment. It didn't hit me like a slap. It was colder. Like realizing the room's been freezing for hours and you were too numb to notice. I didn't argue. I just nodded and stood up. Said I needed air. But inside, something cracked wide open. Because suddenly, all I could hear was my mom's voice from her hospital bed. "You'll know who someone really is, not when things are going well. but when you ask them to stand beside you when it's hard. And I realized Julianne was never beside me. She was above me, looking down. That night, I sat in my car for 2 hours in front of their gate, replaying everything. And as the porch light flickered on and off like they were telling me to leave, I stared at the silver band on my finger and started wondering what it would look like sliding off. I took the ring off that night, not to end anything, just to breathe. I kept it in my jacket pocket for days, running my thumb over the curve of it every time I doubted myself, which was often, because every time I thought about walking away from Julianne, I heard my mom's voice again. Not the gentle part, no, the stern one. The one she used when she caught me trying to quit band in 9th grade because a kid called me poor. You don't quit just because someone made you feel small. You prove them wrong, then decide if they're still worth your time. So I stayed, but staying meant shrinking. The week before the wedding was a blur of seating charts, suit fittings, and being reminded again and again that this wasn't my wedding. It was a Whitmore event, a production, a photo op. I was background. Every suggestion I made got rewritten, downplayed, or ignored entirely. I wanted a live jazz quartet. We got a DJ who played European lounge music. I asked if my godmother could say a few words at the rehearsal dinner. Lorraine said, "That's not the tone we're going for." And Julianne? She always had a reason. "It's just easier this way, babe." Or, "I don't want to argue over details. Let's just focus on the honeymoon." The honeymoon. Somehow we were planning a trip to Greece with money I didn't know we were spending. They'd booked a $9,000 villa without asking me. When I brought it up, she blinked like I was the one being ridiculous. "I thought you'd want me to handle it. You always say I'm good at planning." Sure, planning her life. I didn't realize mine had been absorbed in the process, but nothing compared to what happened 2 days before the wedding. We were at Lorraine's house, her sprawling, sterile mansion with white walls and zero warmth, doing a final walkthrough of the decor mock-up. Lorraine stood in the center of the room like a stage director, pointing at centerpieces and making a young florist flinch every 5 seconds. Julianne was on her phone, pacing by the fireplace. I was off to the side, watching everything like a guest at my own funeral. That's when I noticed it. The box. A wooden jewelry box. Dark oak, gold hinges. Sitting on the credenza behind Lorraine's crystal bar cart. My chest tightened instantly. I'd seen that box every day for 30 years. It sat on my mother's dresser until the day she died. She used to keep little mementos in it, notes from patients, pressed flowers, and a charm bracelet I made for her when I was 7. When she passed, I kept it with me in my apartment. It was one of the only things I had left of her. I walked over, hands shaking, opened it. Empty. No bracelet, no notes. Just the hollow scent of lavender and something stolen. Julianne looked up when she saw me holding it. Her face froze. Then, slowly, she walked over and said, "I brought it here last week. I thought it might look nice on the welcome table." I couldn't speak. Lorraine chimed in from across the room like she was talking about a decorative pillow. "It matches the tone we're going for. Very rustic elegant." They took my mother's box, without asking, used it as a prop. I stared at Julianne, willing her to say something that made sense. Something that didn't make me feel like I was going insane. All she said was, "Kevin, please don't make this into a thing. Make this into a thing." Like grief was an overreaction. Like memory could be rearranged to fit her aesthetic. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the box. I just closed it gently and said, "I'm taking this back." Julianne tried to follow me out. "Wait. Please. It's not what you think." I stopped at the door. "You know what's wild?" I said, looking at her one last time. "My mom spent years trying to make sure people like you had dignity, even when they didn't deserve it. I think I finally understand why that exhausted her." I walked out. But I wasn't done. Because that night, while packing up what little pride I had left, I found something buried at the bottom of Julianne's overnight bag. A folded letter. Yellowed, creased, handwritten. It was from my mother. To Douglas Whitmore, dated 2013. I know you don't want anyone to know. I won't tell. But please get help. For Julianne's sake, if not your own. I stared at the handwriting, stunned. My mom never told me she'd written that. Julianne had known all along, and she used that silence to rewrite the whole story. I didn't sleep that night. Not after finding that letter. Not after realizing that Julianne had kept my mother's words hidden, folded up like a receipt she didn't want to throw away but didn't value enough to frame. I stared at it for hours, reading it again and again until the words blurred, until the pain burned clean. That next day was the rehearsal dinner. A part of me wanted to skip it, say I was sick, disappear and let them wonder where I went. But something about the way Julianne had looked at me the night before, like I was being difficult, I was ruining things, made me feel like I had to go. Not for them. For me. So I could see with my own eyes if there was anything left to fight for. The dinner was held at the Claremont House, a colonial-style venue with chandeliers, valet parking, and servers who looked like they'd all been trained to smile through passive aggression. Everything about it screamed curated perfection. Cold, hollow, expensive. I showed up in a charcoal suit my mom once helped me pick out. "You'll need something timeless," she'd said. And I swear I could still smell her lotion on the collar. The moment I walked in, I felt it. That strange kind of silence people use when they're pretending to like you. I spotted a few of Julianne's coworkers, her college friends, a couple of her relatives I'd never seen before. But from my side, just my godmother Ruth and my best friend Nate. That's it. Julianne saw me and waved like we hadn't argued the night before, like we weren't actively unraveling. I gave her a polite nod. That was all I had left. Dinner was stiff, flavorless, despite the chef's ego. I barely touched my plate. I was waiting, because I knew something was coming. You could feel it in the air. The way Lorraine kept glancing toward the podium. The way Douglas tapped his wine glass like he was practicing a speech in his head. Then it started. Douglas stood up first, raised his glass, smiled at the crowd, and began. Tonight isn't just a celebration of love. It's a merging of families, traditions, and stories. I should have left right then. He started talking about Julianne's childhood, her tenacity, her elegance. "She's always known her worth," he said. Then, with a smirk, added, "And she's always been charitable. Just look at her fiancé." Laughter. Awkward. But still. Laughter. Julianne laughed too. I felt my face go numb. Douglas kept going, this time with a story. How Julianne once brought home a stray cat and nursed it back to health, even though it scratched everything it touched. He chuckled and said, "I suppose that's what she's doing now." I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just stared at my water glass like I could drown in it if I tried hard enough. Then Lorraine stood up. She was worse. She thanked everyone for coming, praised the venue, then said, "We know Clarice isn't with us tonight, but I like to think she's watching over us, probably giving unsolicited advice, like always." The room froze. Some laughed nervously. Lorraine smiled like she was proud of the line. Julianne didn't stop her. She didn't say a word. Then Lorraine looked directly at me. Clarice was persistent, always had opinions about everyone's life, but we all know she meant well. Bless her heart. Bless her heart. That southern backhand that means screw her, but let's keep it cute. I stood up. My chair scraped back hard against the floor. The room went dead quiet. Julianne reached for my hand. I pulled it away. "You want to remember my mother?" I said, my voice tight. "Let's do that. Let's remember how she paid for Douglas's treatment. How she sat with him in group meetings when Lorraine couldn't be bothered. How she bailed you out of your mess and never asked for a single word of thanks." Silence. I turned to Julianne. "And you? How long have you known? About the letter? About everything? She looked stunned. Kevin, not now. No, now. I pulled the folded paper from my pocket and held it up. This? My mother's private words, her last attempt to help someone who didn't deserve it. You kept this from me. You lied. And you let them mock her like she was just some footnote in your perfect little life. Julianne's lip trembled. She reached out, like I'd fall back into line if she touched me. And that's when the twist hit. Douglas stood, red-faced, and snapped, "You don't know what you're talking about. Your mother didn't help me. She ruined me." The room gasped. What? I said, stunned. She told the board about my drinking. She exposed everything. That rehab was court-mandated, not voluntary. She cost me my reputation, my company. She saved your life, I shouted. And you've spent every year since rewriting that story to make yourself the victim. He leaned in, teeth bared. And you? You're nothing but her echo. Just like her. Meddling, self-righteous, disposable. That's when I knew I wasn't going to marry into this family. I was going to burn the invitation. I woke up the morning of the wedding with a strange calm in my chest, like the silence right before a storm levels the entire street. It wasn't nerves. It wasn't grief. It was clarity. Cold. Sharp. Unshakable. Because after the rehearsal dinner, after watching Douglas rewrite my mother's legacy into a smear campaign, after seeing Julianne do nothing, I realized I'd been waiting for someone to save me. Maybe even waiting for her to choose me. But that was never going to happen. Not with people like them. So I got dressed, tied my own tie, brushed off my old shoes with a rag, and slipped the wedding band into my pocket. Not onto my finger. Not yet. When I arrived at the venue, everything was perfect. Too perfect. White roses hanging from beams, rows of silver chairs lined up like soldiers, a harpist strumming chords that didn't match the mood in my head. It was exactly what Lorraine wanted. A magazine spread, not a marriage. People smiled when they saw me, patted my back, told me how lucky I was. No one asked if I was okay. Julianne appeared 10 minutes later, gliding across the courtyard like nothing had happened. Like her father hadn't called my dead mother a disease the night before. "Morning, babe," she said, leaning in for a kiss. I turned my head. Her lips caught my cheek. She pulled back, frowning. "Are we really still doing this?" I looked at her, really looked, and said, "Yeah, we are." She blinked, confused, but then brushed it off with a smile and walked toward her bridesmaids. I waited. Waited through photos, through fake smiles, through Lorraine pulling a server aside because the lemon water had mint instead of cucumber. Waited while Douglas laughed with the pastor like he hadn't unspooled himself the night before. And then it was time. The aisle, the music. Julianne walking toward me, veil floating, bouquet in hand, face glowing like everything was fine. She reached me, took my hand, whispered, "We made it." I smiled, but not the way she expected. The pastor began, "Dearly beloved." I tuned out most of it. I was listening for the pause, the moment he'd say, "If anyone knows any reason." He didn't, so I interrupted him myself. "Actually," I said, stepping forward, voice steady but loud enough to carry, "I do." Gasps, whispers. Julianne gripped my arm. "Kevin, what are you—" I turned to the crowd. "I know this is supposed to be a celebration, but I can't stand here and lie to all of you. I can't pretend this is okay." I turned to Julianne. "You let your family trash my mom. Erase what she did for you. You let them use her memory like a punchline. And when I asked you to speak up, you stayed silent." She opened her mouth, but I held up my hand. "This isn't about a fight. This is about values, about decency, about who we are when no one's watching." And I finally realized, I'm not marrying the person I fell in love with. I'm marrying someone who'd rather stay quiet than do what's right. Lorraine stood up, furious. "This is not the time, Kevin." It's the perfect time, I said, because you made this wedding about your image, your agenda, your rules, so let me return the favor. And then I pulled out my phone, unlocked the voice memo, hit play. Douglas's voice slurred from too many bourbons at the rehearsal dinner. Your mother didn't help me. She ruined me. She told the board about my drinking. She cost me everything. The crowd froze. She was a nosy little martyr, and now her son's just like her, meddling, disposable. The silence that followed was absolute, like someone sucked all the oxygen out of the courtyard. Julianne's face turned white. Lorraine looked like she might faint. Then a few guests got up. First my godmother, then Nate, then someone from Julianne's office I didn't even know. They started walking out. I turned back to Julianne, voice low now. I was going to just walk away, quietly, let you keep your pretty little story. But then I realized, your family depends on silence, on people like my mom keeping their heads down. Not anymore. Julianne tried to speak. Her lip trembled. Please, don't. I handed her the ring. Good luck explaining this in the next press release. Then I stepped down from the altar, walked past the rows of stunned faces, and out into the sunlight. But before I reached the car, my phone buzzed. A text. From an unknown number. Kevin, this is Elise, Julianne's ex-roommate. I saw what happened. I think you deserve to know what really happened between her and your mom. It wasn't just about the letter. I almost didn't text Elise back. After everything that had happened, the ruined wedding, the fallout, the silence from Julianne's side, I thought I'd had my closure. I thought walking away was enough. But that name, my mom's name, showing up again? I couldn't ignore it, so I replied, What do you mean? Elise called me within the hour. Her voice shook like she'd been holding this in too long. Turns out the letter I found, my mom's handwritten plea to Douglas to get help, wasn't the only thing Julianne had hidden. Years ago, when Julianne and Elise were roommates, my mom had visited their apartment, brought soup when Elise was sick, paid for a plumbing repair when the landlord wouldn't return their calls. Small things, the kind no one notices, unless they're keeping score. But here's the twist. A few weeks before my mom passed, she'd given Julianne a locket. It was old, delicate, gold. My grandmother's, actually. Passed down. My mom said, I think Kevin will want to give this to someone he trusts one day. Julianne took it, smiled, said she was honored. Then told Elise privately she planned to update the chain and polish it. Make it less dated. Elise told me she'd confronted Julianne back then, asked if she really understood what the locket meant. Julianne brushed her off, said, It's just a trinket. I'm not marrying into a shrine. A shrine. That's how she saw my mom, my grief, my entire life. So I went to get the locket back. I showed up at Lorraine and Douglas's place unannounced. Lorraine opened the door, makeup perfect, expression tight. I'm not here to talk, I said. I'm here for what's mine. She didn't bother asking what. 10 minutes later, Julianne came down with the locket in her hand. She looked thinner, tired. Makeup caked on like armor. But the same cold defiance sat behind her eyes. I was going to give it back, she said softly. You weren't, I replied. You were going to bury it in a drawer like everything else that didn't fit your aesthetic. She winced, but I didn't wait. I took the locket and turned to leave. That should have been the end. But as I reached the front steps, Douglas's voice stopped me. You've made your point, son. You got what you wanted. Time to let it go. I turned slowly. What I wanted, I said, was to build a life with your daughter, and your family made it very clear I wasn't good enough for that. He laughed, small and smug. You think blowing up the wedding made a difference? You humiliated yourself. I nodded. Maybe. But you know what else I did? I pulled out my phone. Again. This time I had screenshots. Julianne's texts to Elise, Lorraine mocking my mom's cancer, Douglas admitting in writing that he used Clarice's kindness to keep the firm afloat, then cut ties when she got too involved. I'd already sent them to a few people, one of whom happened to be a local journalist my friend Nate knew from college. The same journalist who had just published a story titled, "The Cost of Polished Reputations When Legacy is Built on Silence," with names, photos, and a scanned copy of my mom's letter. Douglas's firm dropped him within 48 hours. Lorraine was removed from a foundation board she'd chaired for years. Julianne, well, she tried to release a statement, blamed the emotional instability of a former fiancé. Didn't work. People remembered the audio, the text, the story behind the flowers and the dress. But here's the part that mattered most to me. People remembered my mom, as she was. Not as a footnote in someone else's pretty narrative, but as a whole, generous, flawed, real human being. It's been 6 months. I keep the locket now in a small wooden box on my bookshelf. I haven't touched it since. Don't need to. Just knowing it's there, safe, undistorted, is enough. Funny how sometimes revenge doesn't look like fireworks. Sometimes it's just the truth, standing tall where no one wanted it to. If I've learned anything, it's this. Silence doesn't make you noble. It makes you a participant. And standing up for someone you love, especially when they can't defend themselves, isn't drama. It's dignity. If you've been through something like this or had to defend someone when it cost you everything, drop your story in the comments. I'd really like to hear it. And if you're still healing, still finding the words, that's okay too. You're not alone. Thanks for sitting with me through this. I'll see you next time.